Eileen, did you sign this? Did you sign it?
And Duffy's here.
Okay. I think everybody signed in. Thank you.
Have anybody there?
All right.
You're
And
not on camera over there. You can wave all you want.
Okay.
Harvey, Duffy, you guys can mute until you're want to wave.
Okay, sorry. Yep.
Hi, Harvey.
All right, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. Like the support. We're here to discuss American fiction. I'm Ed Katz. I was a theater and film critic for a radio station in Connecticut for a couple of years before coming here. I was a film major at Syracuse, and I do marketing by day, and this is the stuff I do at night. So thank you for coming. So we've got, let's see, close to 20 here in person. You can't see it on Zoom, but there's a lot of people off camera, but and we've got, I did.
Now,
Oh, okay.
all of us.
All right. Happy anniversary, Mom and Jeremiah. Big 20, yay.
Yeah.
All right, so for the film American Fiction, I want to see how many people have well, thought it was well done. Let's start with that. Pretty much everybody. Okay, good. All right, great. And did you like it? Did everybody like it also?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, wow.
Pretty
much unanimous. All right, great. Well, I've got a couple of people who made points that were dissenting, so, okay.
Last 5 minutes.
Well, we'll talk about the ending, and I've got, I want to end the discussion. I want to save it for the end. The guy who wrote it and directed it and produced it talked about his thinking of making the ending and what he went through and compared to the book and his decisions and what he felt it meant. So I want to save that for last, though. But I wanted to mention it now, so you guys can remind me if I forget. All right, so American Fiction got a 93% from the critics and a 96% from audiences. On IMDb, it got a 7.5, and we've discussed this before. Anything 7 or over is very good on IMDb, which, if you don't know, is the Internet Movie Database. Okay, the Rotten Tomatoes critics consensus. American Fiction is Cord Jefferson's hilarious directorial debut. I'm questioning the hilarious. They're very funny moments, but I didn't look at it as a comedy, but we can talk about that too, which confronts our culture's obsession with reducing people to outrageous stereotypes. Jeffrey Wright stars as Monk, a frustrated novelist who's fed up with the establishment, profiting from, quote, black, unquote, entertainment that relies on tired and offensive tropes. To prove his point, he uses a pen name to write an outlandish black book of his own, a book that propels him to the heart of hypocrisy and the madness he claims to disdain. All right, so the budget for this movie was $10 million. Worldwide, it made $23 million, with $21 million in the US and Canada, so not much overseas. But it did okay. It was nominated for 5 Academy Awards: Best Picture, Actor, Supporting Actor, Adapted Screenplay, which Cord Jefferson won for, and Best Original Score as well. Did people realize who the mother was for Jeffrey Wright? Okay. All right, because we were like, she looks familiar, and then we saw the, oh, okay. Leslie Uggams, right.
Just a singer.
I always
Was she an actress?
Just like a friend of
I
mine.
didn't know she
now
was that
lives
old.
in the Carolinas, but
Oh.
used to be here.
She looked like,
When I saw
wow.
her moving, she was right
Yeah.
there, and I was
Thought it was
exactly the
her.
same.
She's
Yeah.
aged well.
Yeah,
Really
yeah,
aged well.
yeah. Okay, and then Tracy Ellis Ross gets second billing, and she's in the movie for all of 8 minutes. Oh, somebody wants to come in.
I was disappointed
You,
that she was only in it for 8 minutes.
yeah, I figured she might come in more in flashbacks, but
Yeah.
no, that was it. Tracy Ellis Ross, she was the sister who died, had the heart attack.
She was terrific.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but so bad she died.
Well, that was the discussion, yeah. She got second billing, she was in the movie for 8 minutes. She has a good agent. Issa Rae played Sintara, and I thought she did a terrific job also. And Sterling K. Brown was Cliff. You remember from This Is Us, exactly. And he really, really wanted this role because he didn't want to be the always doing good guy. He needed something to change it up. So, his role here was very, very different.
He must have worked out a lot for that movie. He had a great body, and he didn't look like one.
Yeah, he looked terrific, yep. Okay, this also won the People's Choice Award at the Toronto International Film Festival, and it won literally dozens of other festival awards. It was all over the place and did very, very well. Where did I go here? All right, so I have some critics' responses, some brief ones I'll get into. But I want to give you some background on Cord Jefferson. Let me do that first. So anyone not familiar with him at all? Because this was his first film, but I bet you've seen, almost everybody, yeah. I bet you've seen his TV work. So he started writing on the Comedy Central channel show, the nightly show with Larry Wilmore. He moved on to Netflix's Master of None, if anyone saw that.
Oh, yeah.
The first season was very good. After that, no, but he did write for the first season. And then what Ann and I loved was he did The Good Place, which was originally on NBC and won Emmy for Best Comedy. It was on for four seasons. He wrote for the first three. And anyway, he terrific writer. It's sharp comedy, sometimes silly, very funny, and very smart writing, always. And I think in the beginning of this movie, you could tell right away it's smart writing. He was born in Tucson, white mother, black father, who was an attorney. He lived outside, it says outside the United States. My hunch is it's one of the Arab countries because that's where his father ended up moving. His maternal grandmother was shocked by his daughter, which is Cord Jefferson's mother, choice to marry a black man, and he shut her and his grandson out of his life. His Jefferson's parents divorced when he was 14 after his first year of high school. He attended William and Mary. Yeah, there you go. And after college, he lived in LA and Brooklyn, and he went to NYU Business School. His mother died in 2016 of cancer. When his father needed a kidney transplant in 2008, he donated one of his, and he had to go to Saudi Arabia to do it because that's where his father was living. He wrote a personal essay on the experience, noting that he was treated for atrial fibrillation, and after surgery, he quit smoking and began to take better care of his health. Okay, he also wrote for The Watchmen, the HBO series, which anyone, if you haven't seen it, it was dark, but it was good. And Station 11, also another HBO series. All right, now for some of the critics' comments, and I want you guys to comment on what you think of some of these comments. All right, so I'm not this one. I gotta go here. One second. A Hollywood Reporter, Lovia Giark, I know I'm pronouncing that wrong, wrote that American fiction is smart and thanks to its fine cast has genuine heart. She commended Wright's subtle physicality that contributes depth to his character, as well as Leslie Uggams' increasingly somber performance as Agnes and Sterling K. Brown's delightful comedic turn. Variety, Peter DeBruge applauded Jefferson's writing prowess, likening him to Flannery O'Connor and Toni Morrison, whose works were both referenced in the film. To DeBruge, Jefferson, quote, trusts his audience to bring themselves to the material, which is what makes watching American fiction so rewarding, unquote. Now, Peyton Robinson wrote for Roger Ebert's website, as everyone I think knows, Roger Ebert's been gone for a while, but RogerEbert.com lives on, and there's plenty of guest critics. He highlighted Jefferson's writing as the key takeaway from this film, stating that his attentive lens to the film's concept and themes is what will be remembered. He goes on to identify the distinguishable legacy within the script, emphasizing Jefferson's sharply pointed finger at the many institutional factors that keep Black art and its creators restrained. Okay, anyone want to have any comments yet? Not yet. Okay. New York Times, Sarah Leal covered Jeffrey Wright in a feature about his career and his role in American fiction, claiming his exquisitely calibrated performance demonstrates Wright's ability to elevate any movie or TV show simply by appearing in it. Leal goes on to celebrate that Wright has a way of burrowing so deeply into his characters, he seems almost to be hiding in plain sight. And have people seen Jeffrey Wright before?
I haven't.
Okay. He's been in hero movies, Marvel comic movies. He's played bad guys. He's played good guys. He was in HBO's Westworld. Spoiler alert here. He plays a guy you think is a really good guy and he turns out to be a robot. But he was really, really good at it. Okay. Filmmaker Gina Prince Bythewood praised writer-director Cord Jefferson, stating an artist's first work should tell the world who they are, and Jefferson, quote, has screamed into a bullhorn, bold, chaotic, unflinching, personal. He has channeled his creative truths into a searing indictment of biased norms, unquote. Okay, so the film really deals, obviously, with prejudice. And how do you think Jeffrey Wright's character was dealing with that? Not well?
Not so well, no.
Okay, and tell me, I gotta ask you to elaborate a little, please. Why do you think?
Well, the scene where he went, to the bookstore,
Yes.
and he
Okay.
couldn't understand why his novels, which were written not for a Black audience, but for everybody,
Correct.
what were they doing in the
African
African
American section. Right.
Why?
Right.
That, he couldn't get that.
And do you remember Ned's answer? Ned from the Barnes and Noble or whatever the
Yeah,
store was?
Black, right, I think the author's Black, and he said, yeah, that would be me.
Right, exactly.
That would be me,
Right.
yeah,
All right.
no.
There was another scene earlier, actually, which I thought was kind of funny, where he's on the phone with someone and he's talking about how he doesn't really see himself as Black. He doesn't kind of care about it. And he's saying that while he's trying to catch a cab. You remember what the cab does?
Yeah.
Goes right by him and picks up the white guy.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So how does the
Those
movie
are the
look?
kinds of things that kind of make it kind of silly. That's the part, those are exactly those kinds of things. Yes, it happens all the time, we understand that, but it was kind of like that, and the same, you're thinking about the bookstore, although I gotta tell you, that's real. As an author, I go into every bookstore, where's my book? But that to me makes it a little bit of a farce. And that's the problem I had with the movie. I love the
Okay.
movie, but it can be farcical.
Okay, yeah, well, there's comedic parts to it, satirical, but he does
Yeah.
different kinds of humor. I think there's different types of humor during the movie. Okay, someone said he was, actually, I think it was the character of Wiley, who said to Jeffrey Wright's character, I think he said, you're swinging for the fences. So you need something at the ending of the movie that kind of matches that. So, and I think that same could be said of Cord Jefferson, what he was doing making this movie. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I want to get to the ending, or endings, however you want to call it later. But all right, so I had some notes I wanted to share with you. The title of the book originally that he wrote, you remember what it was before he changed it? My Pathology, right. So if you look at it from the definition of pathology, is he saying my disease? I mean, is that what he was saying? My diagnosis? Right? So I think there's an uneasy relationship that the film has with Jeffrey Wright's character. Is it sympathetic or is it sort of harsh? And I think it kind of vacillates back and forth between both. What do you guys think?
He's angry. I think he's angry. I mean, that opening scene, he was angry.
Right, and he didn't want to have to go back
The
to,
N-word,
right,
that he asked, just because one of the students was from Germany, oh, were your parents Nazis? I
right,
mean, that's when they told them to take a break.
right.
Take a break.
I wondered, maybe he just wasn't a very good writer, but he couldn't accept that. And he was, figuring all other things to blame it on. In
Right.
society, it was,
Like,
Right.
he wanted to be a serious writer.
Right.
He wanted to be taken seriously because of his academic credentials and,
But he also was very angry because of, like he had to say with
as his father.
Right, okay, so do we know what happened to his father?
He shot
Yeah.
himself.
He shot himself, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because she comes out and says that was the house that. Right. They shot himself.
Right, that's right, Coraline said that to him, exactly, and then she was like, oh, she realized who he was, and so, oops,
Oh, my
my
God.
bad, yeah. Right. And also, he found out later, apparently, about his father having affairs,
Yep.
plural. And he was the one who didn't know, and his brother and sister did, and apparently they bonded, and he was kind of separated.
Good,
And the
he was the good child.
I don't know if it was because he was the good child, but he was the
But
one who got
father-
along better with the father. Right, and then the father kills himself, so that would make him bitter, I think, right? That could do it.
The wife
Ed,
said,
Ed, can you hear me?
Go ahead, Duffy.
Oh, thank you. I think that he was trying to live in a society that didn't see race because he came from a pretty educated, affluent background. And I think he really wanted to believe that once you get to a certain point, race doesn't matter. And that's why he wrote books that had nothing to do with race, but had to do with revisioning of the Greek tragedies. And, they didn't sell, but then, he decided to go to the lowest common denominator.
And
But I think that was his motivation.
confronted by, right?
I'm sorry, what was that?
What did he keep getting confronted by? Centara's success doing what he called the pandering.
Right, exactly. I think it was pandering. Lowest common denominator.
There was a big discussion. You remember the discussion when they were doing the awards judging? He finally had the scene I think we all wanted to see, where he sits down with Centara and asks her about her book.
she wasn't too happy.
Right, she wasn't too happy. Did she get defensive?
Very.
Yeah, she did. But she also had an explanation that she was at peace with herself about it. Do you remember what it was?
Well. They were both the same, I think, ultimately.
Well, right,
I mean,
but
she-
her
she-
perspective on it was different than
Yes, it
his.
was. She
Right.
didn't see her writing as pandering, but she accused him of that.
Right, but she didn't see it as pandering, but she said, there was a quote, I hope I can remember it, something, she said, it's okay to write what audiences want, right? She did say something very close to that, but I didn't get it perfect. And you remember the name of her book?
Yeah, something about living in the ghetto.
Weeze lives in the ghetto.
Yeah, like in black dialect. And she also came from a wealthy, she went to.
Upper middle class family, Oberlin educated, exactly, right, right,
Yes.
yep. Yeah, very similar, right?
Yes.
And then she tries to accuse him of criticizing her because she's a woman,
Yeah,
right?
well, that's something to go to.
He was also angry at himself that he had to write that book to be popular.
And that it succeeded, and that
Yeah.
it's. so-
Well,
Yeah.
but he didn't expect it to be popular. But you're right, he wrote it because he was angry and frustrated, and he just wanted to get it out there as a big sort of FU to the publishing world.
It's a terrible book. Something.
Yes,
It's interesting, she, who came from a
she meaning Centara,
Centaur,
Uh-huh.
who comes from a very high class background, had no problem selling her book with her background.
yes.
Why did he have to make himself an outcast?
Writing that book?
Yeah.
I think.
Because he hated it.
Right.
He didn't want to be associated with it.
He was an intellectual.
But he's an
But
intellectual,
he
he's
still
an
didn't have to
academic.
make himself the murderer or,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, that I think sort of came from his publisher, his agent rather, his agent,
But he
yeah.
didn't have to go along with it, but he did.
That's
He needed
true.
the money.
That's true, but he did need the money and he kept resisting. And finally, the guy pointed out, look, you really do need the money, then would this help?
Gotta
Like,
take
okay,
it.
gotta take it, right,
Yeah, they wouldn't.
He had to
they
pay for his
wouldn't-
mother.
He needed money,
right.
and when he was speaking to the college, and he said, look, my mother's sick, I really need money, could you change my sabbatical, for leave of absence? It was a very brief conversation.
Right.
Obviously, they refused.
They said no, exactly, right. So remember what he said? Oh, actually, I have a quote here. What he said about his book when he was with Ned, or I don't know if it was with Ned or someone else. He said, maybe it was his agent. The blackest thing about this book is the ink. Okay. I thought there was, they keep showing him as being the distant one in his family. And I thought that was also kind of shown when his sister has the heart attack and dies. He's at the hospital and all he can see are her feet, right?
And they stop moving.
And then they stop moving and that's how he knew she was dead. Yeah.
And also, when toward the end, when Leslie Evans, when his mother is trying to remember, and she doesn't remember Monk, but she remembers Cliff and the daughter.
Right.
And she says, calls him by Cliff's name.
Right.
That was sad. I noticed the way they changed from one scene to the next was very different. And I was fascinated by that. Each time they changed, didn't necessarily have anything to do with this scene, the next scene. And it was like in segments,
Hmm.
the whole movie.
Yeah, sort of like chapters, actually, I thought. That was the way I looked at it. Like, separating chapters in a book. Yeah, the ending or the endings had the fades to black. That was different. But the rest of the movie was the way you're saying, yes, right. Okay.
Maybe
Oh.
that was on purpose.
Yeah, oh, I'm sure it was. Yeah, I mean, pretty much everything was on purpose. So all the three siblings were all doctors, all different kinds of doctors, but all doctors. Kind of ironically, or obviously intentionally, Cliff was a plastic surgeon
That was
because
funny.
he was going through his identity thing, in hating being in Tucson as a gay man, finally coming out. And then his sister worked at the family clinic, family planning clinic. And you remember what her middle name was? Lisa Ellison was her name, but they said it at her, the memorial service or the funeral service. Her middle name was Magical, Lisa Magical Ellison. So he was Thelonious Ellison, which was why he got the name Monk, named after the
Thelonious.
famous jazz musician, right?
What do you think is the similarity?
Well, jazz is,
Black.
it's not only black, it's a form of music that sometimes goes against the grain. And I think that's the type of character Monk was, the guy who was going against the grain, fighting the system to try to see it the way he was and trying to make it the way he was, and that's not the way it was. But jazz was like that. And interestingly, they did have a lot of jazz in the music of the movie, but none of it was by Thelonious Monk. Maybe they couldn't get the rights or, nope, nothing. Nope. So I thought that was kind of interesting, but I'll get to some of that in a little bit too. All right, so now we see one of the major white characters in the film, and there weren't a lot, but the movie producer director Wiley, right? Adrian Brody, right? I keep confusing him with the guy who was in the pianist, yeah, Adrian Brody. This is Adam Brody, I think. I got it here, one sec. I think it's Adam Brody.
Yeah.
I think it's Adam Brody.
Adrian Brody's a really serious actor.
Well, he's been in those films by the guy Wes Anderson. Thank you. Yes.
Oh,
So he does his comedic turn. Thank you very much. Exactly. Adam Brody, right? Yeah, he played Wiley Valdespino. So, and you remember the name of the movie he was making?
Something is annihilation, so plantation annihilation.
Exactly, Plantation Annihilation. Okay, so he was making, I don't know if he was supposed to be a satire on Quentin Tarantino, but something along those lines. No, this guy was heavier than that, yeah, but, and not as humorous. He was going for the big splashy blood things. All right, and then, okay, so the awards committee, and I have a note on this. So this I thought was very, very funny, and I got a note on it here. Let me get to that now. I hope I can find it pretty quick. You remember when they had the 5 people on the awards committee? Three were white, 2 were black. Here, I got it. Okay. The 5 literary award judges cast their final votes. The choice to award the top prize to Monk's facetious novel breaks down by race, with the 3 white judges voting for it and the 2 black judges opposed. This is a reference to a founding and racist principle written into the US Constitution, the 3/5 Compromise. This agreement at the 1787 Constitutional Convention stated that for the purposes of population counts affecting representation and taxes, quote, free persons excluding Indians would each be counted as a whole person, but slaves would each be counted as only 3/5 of a person. Though this part of the Constitution was repealed by the 14th Amendment, its implications reverberate in racial and voting right issues to the present. So that was another reference kind of tucked in. And the other thing was there was the white woman judge was sort of shouting down, oh, someone else wants to come in. Sorry.
Right on time.
Yeah, kind of pretty late. You can see who it is. So I thought that was pretty interesting, you know, with the judges. So I don't see.
See, that's for me the other part where they're two-dimensional. And that was the thing.
Well, the white judges,
Yeah,
the
she's
white
definitely-
woman judge was basically dismissive of the 2 blacks.
Yeah.
And she was kind of saying she knew better about the importance of the black writing.
Right.
So that was his play
Right.
on what he sees is going on, I think, with the arts world.
Yeah.
And the white guilt kind of overcompensating for guilt of blacks on the treatment of blacks. I would also argue, and I'm going to maybe get criticized for this, but the New York Times, if you look at the arts section, overly focuses on minorities, much more so than on white people. I mean, it's not even close to proportionate. And I would say NPR does similarly in the stories they choose. They do a good job covering stories, but the stories they choose to cover tend to very much focus on minorities. And I think that is what he is poking fun at, like white guilt. So, like I said, I may get criticized, but I do see it. It's like, I get the Times every day and I'm noticing, it's just there.
Well, it's changed, movies.
Yeah, it's changed.
It changed. It's not, it wasn't like that.
It wasn't like that a long time ago. Okay.
Right to the Times about that?
It's been said, it's been said by others.
And
Yes,
speaking of the New York Times, I had cut out the article. Actually, I meant to sort of bring it, if anyone was, the other day, a few days ago, there was a big article about, and they mentioned American fiction
Mhm.
and other films like that, and they were criticizing American fiction, particularly. They said that while it was a good movie, they felt that it flattened out, the black characters. And, you know, I thought about that. They said it didn't show like more aspects of what it means to be black. And I personally thought that was sort of unfair because they made their point with the characters.
right.
You can't really show total culture, but I thought that was an unfair comment.
Well, the main
Did you see that article by any
characters.
I
chance?
did not, but I've got something that's similar. I'm gonna
It
read.
was a big
The
article.
main characters were well-educated, prosperous blacks. They all were well-educated.
Well,
they were
that's
all
the thing.
doctors. I mean, that's not the.
Well, that wouldn't be the norm with whites either. You're not gonna have three doctors in a family as a norm. It happens, but
Pretty unusual.
it's unusual. Yeah.
Was the author of that article, do you know, a white or black person, critic?
You know, I'm not sure.
Sometimes
I-
you can't tell.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't
All
know.
right. So this was from Film Companion, and this was a critical review of the movie. There weren't many, but this one was. And it appeared in India, and the review is by someone named Sharanya Kumar. At one point, American fiction protagonist Thelonious Monk Ellison is accused of being unknowable. He's a writer-professor frustrated with a publishing industry that cannot see past his race and is determined to typecast him as a black author. His old books are shelved in the African-American literature section at bookstores, which frustrates him because he insists race plays no part in his stories. His newest book is rejected because it's, quote, not black enough, unquote. He would like to believe literature, specifically what he writes, is above such stereotypes. I don't even really believe in race, he says to his agent. Oh, here it is. Even as a taxi he hails deliberately bypasses him to stop in front of a white man a few feet away from him. It's a detail that underscores Monk's unknowability. From his righteous indignation at a performative publishing industry to his sticky relationship with his own race, we never really get a full sense of how we're supposed to see the protagonist of American fiction. Is he an idealist we should get behind, or a naive man with a blinkered view of reality? I would say both, actually. Now, based on the novel Percival Everett's 2001 novel, Erasure, which I didn't read. Actually, I kind of want to read it now, but I didn't read it. It does not hesitate to make fun of the white-dominated American publishing industry, mocking editors, authors, and marketers for the way they look to soothe their guilty consciences by overcompensating. The white characters in American fiction all come off as simpering and caricaturish. Of course, the white girl schooling her black professor on the use of the N-word has blue hair, a trait negatively associated with, quote, wokeness, unquote, on the internet. That I didn't realize. In an age of tokenism, with white people fearful their opportunities are being taken by people of color, the film's take on white anxieties is relevant. Oh, by the way, the actress who played the young girl with the blue hair, Brittany Wright. Jeffrey Wright was the lead. I checked, it didn't look like there was any relation, but I just thought that was kind of, when you look at the credits, because, you know, order of appearance,
Right.
Jeffrey Wright, Brittany Wright. Okay, or maybe it's Stephanie Wright, but her character was Brittany. Okay, so,
I'd like to comment about one of the things that was in there. You know, this is a movie. And you have 2 hours, or an hour and a half or something to create an entire world that, now we're maybe 10 years ago would have been fine, but we're now used to serials where it's 9 hours, it's 15 hours, it's 4 years of we get to know the characters really well. In 2 hours, he's gonna create a whole black culture
Right.
and a whole story. That's a limitation.
right,
So you have to cut the corners. And I
Right.
think that's what they did.
Right.
Sometimes it becomes a stereotype.
Mhm.
And that's what bothered me, is that became a stereotype. And I'm now used to seeing 9 hours of a character.
yeah, you can get into the depth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't think we can see that in movies anymore.
Yeah, it's hard. You're right. It's hard. So yeah, it says in an age of tokenism with white people fearful their opportunities are being taken by people of color, the film's take on white anxieties is relevant. In the world of fiction, the novel Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, 2023, features a white woman publishing a book under an Asian pen name in order to lean into the appeal of non-white authors in today's industry. Meanwhile, in the real world, white author Kate Corain recently lost her debut publishing deal when it came out that she was anonymously review bombing books by POC, people of color, debutantes, because she felt their work would be spotlighted over hers. In context of this, the commentary in American fiction should feel pertinent and timely. Unfortunately, it only feels simplistic. Partly as a practical joke and partly as a desperate retreat from the real world, Monk writes a parody book of his own after his sister passes away. Okay. Oh, we see him writing a scene that features a gunslinging black man, a deadbeat dad, and a run-in with cops. Quote, "What's blacker than that?" says Monk dryly. Ultimately, the joke turns out to be on Monk because, much to both his and his agent's surprise, the book is picked up by a leading publisher and becomes nominated for most prestigious prize. To a large extent, the movie is held back by its outsized focus on his family life, which feels like a frustrating distraction from the irreverent drama of the publishing world. At its best, American fiction grapples with a number of meaningful issues, with Monk at the center of it all. Monk resents that Black people in media are reduced to their trauma. He is fed up of, quote, old soaring narratives about Black folks in dire circumstances who still manage to maintain their dignity before they die, unquote. And yet American fiction doesn't feel like it's entirely on Monk's side. We see how stiff and abrasive he can be, how he comes across as uncaring and extremely self-conscious of his race. His brother Cliff points out Monk only used to date white women and has a superiority complex about his intellectual persona. With his PhD, family beach house, and a housekeeper who refers to him as Mr. Monk, he has the privilege to associate himself with conventionally white signifiers. He balks at the notion his race is inextricably linked with his position as an author and does not want his work to be judged on that basis. Yet Monk's attitude comes across less as colorblindness and more as willfully ignorant. Now, here it is, Sintara versus Monk.
Willfully ignorant.
Willfully, right. The film's most compelling scene sees Monk share his concerns about Black literature with Sintara Golden, an excellent Issa Rae, whom he considers emblematic of a systemic problem in publishing. Sintara, I don't want to say Sinatra. Sintara's debut novel, We Lives in the Ghetto, is praised by critics as raw, real, and visceral, much to his frustration. All he sees in her is a polished, privileged Black woman who has nothing in common with the people she writes about. Although her intent may be more earnest than Monk, he points out that her best-selling novel is not too different from his parody of a book, which is being taken seriously by the literary establishment. As a woman who went to an elite college and had a fancy publishing job in New York, Sintara's novel discusses issues of which she has little knowledge or experience. However, she's keenly aware of what white publishers expect from a Black author, and We Lives in the Ghetto feels like her way of gaming the system to have a successful book on her hands. She's frank about her decision to cater to white publishers, quote, giving the market what it wants, unquote. She also brings in the additional perspective of gender into the conversation, questioning if Monk is similarly contemptuous of white male authors who write about the downtrodden. Okay, here's the end. Monk says he sees the unrealized potential of Black people in this country, to which she replies, potential is what people see when they think what's in front of them isn't good enough. It's a powerful scene in which both Monk and Sintara are making good points, but you're left wondering who is right, or at least more right in this situation. Jefferson doesn't show us enough of this clash, and neither does he give us a resolution to Monk and Sintara's debate. Okay, I would argue there isn't one. I think by showing both sides of the issue, he presented them, and you make your own call, but I don't know if there is one. The two writers, however, have common ground in their disdain for Monk's parody book, written under a pseudonym, but their opinions are silenced by their white counterparts, one of whom declares that, quote, it's essential to listen to Black voices right now, which is while she was like kind of shouting them down. It's ironically fitting a real conversation about Black identity is cut short by a politically correct spiel from a white person more interested in appearances than actually listening to Black people. The ending is just as open-ended. We see Monk go up on stage to receive an award for the book he hates, but we don't know what he actually says. Okay, now, I'll finish this first. The film cuts to Monk brainstorming potential climactic sequences with Wiley, the producer of the movie based on his book. Monk says he doesn't want to spoon-feed the moral of the story because there is no moral. By now, Monk has made peace with the fact he cannot judge a system from his moral high ground on the outside, choosing instead to become a part of it, blurring the lines between his own fiction and reality in order to thrive creatively. It leads the audience to wonder how much of the film was real and how much was sensationalized to appeal to commercial tastes. Some of the dialogue offers themselves up to a fascinating meta reading. Monk's book is described as awards bait with a capital B, with its movie rights sold to a producer who, quote, specializes in Oscar baity issue movies, unquote. One cannot help but wonder if the 5 Academy Award nominations American Fiction scored are a product of the very phenomenon it is satirizing. All right, so kind of interesting, but where was it?
Did you?
Oh, when they talk about him brainstorming the ending, do you remember what Monk said he actually in real life, how he left it with the award when his pseudonym was recognized? He walked out. He just very quiet. I didn't get it the first time I saw the movie. At the second time, he's just kind of mentioning, yeah, I walked out. But of course, Wiley doesn't want to make the ending that, right? It's not dramatic enough. He wants something more powerful. And then eventually Monk gets to it. All right, I think we can start getting to that about the ending, because I do want to talk about that with you guys. How are we on time? Okay, we're pretty good.
One thing I want to point out though,
Sure.
I was thinking about when you started talking about it's really hard to write satire.
Yeah.
So he's belittling himself, his
Yes.
ability as a writer.
Yep.
By thinking it's just a parody. But he put his heart and soul in writing the parody, which is damn hard. I mean, it's really good writing to be, so he really belittled himself the whole time.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I agree. Right. Himself as, through the character also.
Yeah.
There's an easy answer to that. That's why there's so few really good writers,
Yeah.
because it is hard.
It is hard. Yeah.
It's hard.
Comedy's hard, Yeah. So here's one scene where Cord Jefferson explains a key scene, which I thought was terrific. This was in Esquire. He was interviewed explaining his approach and how the actors elevated it in unexpected ways. And here's his quote. "We've all seen that scene of the writer pounding the keyboard frantically, then taking a big sip of coffee. I usually see alcohol, drinking alcohol, and getting back to it. That's how you depict somebody intensely writing. But I thought, we can't have that. It's tropey and silly, and it doesn't get the audience's minds going. So to me, that says he really wants the audience's minds working. So why not have these characters manifest in front of him? You remember the scene where he was writing and the actors appeared and they're
that
having a
was so
discussion with him? Right, right. So he said, when I wrote that scene, I wrote the language to be very silly. It had to be ridiculous so everybody could see how stupid this book is and what a sham it is. Then we got Keith David, and I'm never going to pronounce this guy's name right, Ofioretti Anadawan, who are both such tremendous actors. All of a sudden, it wasn't silly anymore. They made it seem like the book might be good. I love what the scene became in their hands. Suddenly, you're questioning whether or not the book is good, which is evidence that something as ridiculous as this book could become a hit. I thought that was a pretty fascinating comment. Now, most of the fictional book titles of the other award finalists, I don't even remember the names of the books, but they were taken from when Cord Jefferson was in middle school and high school, his friends were in bands, rock bands, and those were the names of the bands. That's where I got those names. The photo Monk stares at the stairway from Doctors Kenneth and Marnie Clark's study is the doll test, which was used in the Supreme Court case Brown versus Board of Education, which ended school segregation. Photo was taken by Gordon Parks. Although there's plenty of jazz on the soundtrack, none of it's by Monk, the real Thelonious Monk. The family name Ellison is based on several influential writers. I did wonder about this one. Each influencing aspects of Thelonious and the story. Harlan Ellison wrote speculative fiction, was known for his abrasive attitude, and Ralph Ellison wrote Invisible Man about social and intellectual issues faced by African Americans. Sheila Ellison is a writer and speaker who discusses issues regarding parenting and relationships. When Jefferson sent the prospective screenplay out to film companies, it was under the more provocative title of the book, with the F word. While this is a plot point in the film, it was never going to go out to theaters with a title like that, so it was changed to American Fiction late in the day, just prior to its premiere at the Toronto Film Festival. Little trivia thing, it's the first Best Picture nominee to include the term awards bait in the film. Jeffrey Wright was always Cord Jefferson's first choice to play the part of Monk. I mentioned about Sterling K. Brown looking for something completely, the complete antithesis of the noble character he played in This Is Us. So he leaped at the chance to play Cliff, especially given he considered Cord Jefferson's script to be one of the best he'd ever read. Okay, now the casting of Miriam Shore as a book editor was apparently a hat tip to her similar role on the TV series Younger. I only watched 1 or 2 episodes of that, but okay. Now, the pseudonym, Stag R. Lee. Did anyone know anything about the name? Very good. Stagger Lee, right.
Hillbilly.
It's right. It's a play on an early 20th century folk song that's been performed in various forms and under various title spellings by such artists as Ma Rainey, Mississippi John Hurt, Duke Ellington, Cab Calloway, Woody Guthrie, Sidney Beckett, Lloyd Price, Pat Boone, Ike and Tina Turner, and Wilson Pickett. The song was based on the real life story of an 1895 murder committed by Lee Shelton, a pimp from St. Louis, Missouri, who went by the nicknames of Stag, Stackerly, Staggerly. Because of the widespread popularity of the song, the story of Shelton was developed into an open, often admired, criticized stereotype of Black masculinity and criminality. Tracy Ellis Ross was playing a doctor, much like she did for the 8 seasons of Blackish. Oh, all right. So now it's okay. I mentioned that. Okay. Any other comments yet?
Did you find any research of what Black audiences thought of the movie?
Not audiences, but I specifically looked for Black critics, and it was nominated for a bunch of NAACP awards. and it got great reviews, and the NAACP had some sort of official person commenting saying it probably should have been nominated for more. But interestingly enough, it didn't win. I was trying to find out what did win, but I didn't finish it out and find it. But it was nominated for Best Picture for the NAACP, but didn't win, which I think is kind of interesting.
I'm curious, Ed, about the Alice Walker's book, The Color Purple. That whole thing was written in dialect.
Yes.
And when I first started reading the book, it was a little odd for me until I just did phonetically. I just read phonetically, and then I got the dialect, and it was fine. So I'm curious where that kind of thing, of course, The Color Purple was, I don't know, what was it, 25, 30 years ago already? How that fits in with this discussion. Do you think that had anything to do with pandering or exploiting or anything like that?
Well, it's just from the standpoint of the writers doing it to potentially pander to white audiences and critics on what the stereotype was for what they were supposed to be writing about. I think that was it. But I can, well, first, okay. Did I sort of answer your question?
I just muted myself because I don't want to close the window. A plane just flew by. Yeah, I was just curious. I just thought about that because that book was so incredibly beloved and made a movie and then another movie on The Color Purple.
Yeah,
What, you know, the comparison of writing in that kind of dialect.
I think Roots did as well. I think that was one of the earlier ones. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay. And then the other thing I guess you're going to get to is the different endings and what, because I found that very jarring at first.
Right.
You know, you didn't know that it was, if it was fiction or not, you thought it was real. And then trying to get, I guess, all of us, the audience into it, that we were kind of co-writing and saying, oh, how should he end this?
Right.
And I at first I didn't like it at all. And then I kind of understood why he's trying to figure out what kind of ending would be the best.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So if you remember, when he was talking to Wiley, he said, there is no moral. That's the idea. I like the ambiguity. You know, about as far as the fade out, when he says, I have a confession to make, and you don't hear it, and it just fades out. That was the first ending. And the second one, he goes, you remember the second one? He goes to Coraline?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And he says, I'd like to apologize. And you remember what his next line is? I'd like to apologize. I haven't been myself lately. Come
Right.
on, line, right? He was Stag Lee. He wasn't himself.
Right.
Duffy, were you saying something?
No, I just said right. Yes, he wasn't himself. That was a perfect line. I haven't been myself.
So then, but Wiley didn't like it. He says, nope, it's too pat.
I love the third one.
And then finally they, you know, and they do the third one where the cops come, they shoot him because he pulls out the award. They think it's a gun and that they kill him. And do you remember what the soundtrack was when that happened? It was a Requiem, but it was the chorus of Amen. As he's laying there dead and bloodied, you hear Amen, big chorus.
You had mentioned at the beginning how this was humorous. I mean, did anybody find themselves laughing hysterically at that last scene? I did.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, yeah. And some other people did.
I did.
No, I agree with you.
Well, you knew it was, there's no ending, there's three endings.
Yeah.
So that's the funny one.
Yeah.
The other thought I had afterwards, if you thought of a logical ending in this context of our world, that was a very logical ending.
Yes, and that's the point. I
exactly.
think that's exactly the point. Right,
Yeah.
right. That's exactly the point. Yep.
And it fits in perfectly with the parody of the whole black thing.
Yes.
I mean, it was perfect.
Well, that's what Wiley said. That is perfect.
Yes.
And then what Monk said
I
after
didn't
that,
like it.
he said the title of his book right to the camera.
Yeah.
So I thought that was originally, if they were going to title the movie that made perfect sense.
Right.
So,
They couldn't
okay,
title that.
right, no, they could.
of industry too.
Oh, okay. Now there's another little thing that happened right at the end. Monk walks out, kind of bewildered that the movie is gonna happen and he's not thrilled with how it's gonna happen, just like he wasn't thrilled with the book. But right, so
Oh,
go ahead, Bart, go ahead.
and that was that was really moving.
Yeah, go ahead.
The extra, the little boy who was the extra, you remember that? And he gives him the sign that he knows. It was like really wonderful. Right, that was the most serious moment, the poignancy
Right.
of it.
Tell me about that.
Okay, so he's walking out of the set, ready to go into Cliff's Mercedes convertible.
Right.
And there's a character actor who's in costume for the Plantation Annihilation movie they're making right now. He's sitting there in costume and he sees Monk and Monk sees him and the character guy goes like this. And Monk looks at him and with a recognition. It's like, okay. And to me, it was like, this is what you got to do to get by. And it's okay. And I get it. They were each like to each other. Just a quick moment. I mean, you might have missed it, but that was right there. And I thought it was very poignant.
I love that.
Right, exactly. All right, so now about the endings, I want to read you what Cord Jefferson actually said. He was interviewed with Jordan Raup for the movie website, The Film Site. Cord Jefferson gave a lengthy explanation of how he developed the ending and what he thinks it means. All right, this is all him saying now.
Who? Who's saying?
Cord Jefferson, the writer, director, producer. It took a while to find. So the original ending to the novel is the first ending. Monk steps up to the microphone and the book's over and you have no idea what he's going to say. The original ending to the script was the second ending, where he goes to Coraline's house and says, I need to apologize. I haven't been myself lately. And I always knew that was not the right ending. I was like, this is a clever turn of phrase. I haven't been myself lately. And so that's kind of funny, but I always knew that wasn't the appropriate ending in the film. So I was struggling to come up with what it was. I was on a long drive to a wedding in the desert in California, and I was talking to Ben LeClaire, one of the producers. And we were like 2 or 3 months away from pre-production. He was like, we really need to figure out what the ending is. And I was like, I know. So he said, the piece of advice I can give you is just try to come up with an ending that feels as audacious as the rest of the film. Here it is. The film is a big swing. So try to come up with an ending that feels like a big swing. I knew the line was somewhere. And so I thought, okay, I'll do that. So I went and slept on it that night. And then I woke up for whatever reason, I started thinking about The Player, the Robert Altman movie. And I was like, maybe there's an interesting meta ending because the book is a little metatextual. What's a meta way that we could do this? And so then that ending just poured out of me. So I wrote it in like 15 minutes. And what I wrote in like 15 minutes was the original 3 endings. And when he gets shot and the producer says, great, it used to be that Monk just looked down the barrel and said the F word right into the camera. He just sort of directly said the F word. And then that was the initial ending. So that was the first ending we put in the film. And then we had a test screening and it was very divided. It was like 45% of the audience said, we love the ending, do not change it. But there was a large percentage of the audience that said the ending was clever and intellectually satisfying, but it wasn't emotionally satisfying. Because some people were left with the question, well, wait a minute, were those people real then? Does Monk have a brother? Does he have a sister? Was this just all a figment of his imagination that he was coming up with to write this movie? So I sat down to think, okay, that's something we can do. What's something we can do that isn't having a stupid ending just to clarify, like, yes, this is real. So I was like, what can we do that again that feels like a piece of the rest of the film that can be a nice coda that will satisfy this note of, I'm not sure if these people are real, but also have a little bit of bite, the way the rest of the film has a little bit of bite. What if he comes out and sees Cliff? Because I wanted it to be Cliff and not Coraline. I thought if it was Coraline, it would have been a little too sappy and also not the point of the film, which I think he's right. It's a better ending if these 2 brothers find their way back to each other as opposed to, quote, Monk gets the girl, unquote. Who cares if Monk gets the girl? You want Monk to find his way back to somebody who's loved him for years. That felt right to me. And then it was like, but what could be happening out there? Well, it's plantation annihilation, so there would be people around in slave costumes. And so what if he sees somebody in a slave costume? When I came up with that, that to me was the perfect final moment, because to me, the end of Monk's journey is he finds his way back to his brother and he finds a way to stop alienating himself from everybody in his life who loves him. But also the start of the film is Monk very much on his high horse, thinking you guys who are playing slaves and writing these kinds of books are losers and you're wasting your time. and I make superior art, and you guys make garbage art, and it's embarrassing. The way that I interpret that final moment is Monk has realized that these artists that he was looking down at in the beginning, like him, are just working within the confines of a system that was made generations before any of them got there. And so I think that's what he's like seeing is like, oh, this guy just wants to be an actor, and this is what he has to do to be an actor. In the way that it's sort of like, this is what I had to do to get my movie made. I had to concede and let this guy give me this stupid ending where the black guy gets killed by the cops at the end. So I'm complicit in this system. It's just a system people are forced into. So I'm finally seeing this guy for what he is, which is just a guy trying to have a creative life and live as an artist. This is what he has to do in order to do that sometimes. To me, it's the kind of cynicism that I like, which is cynicism, but I think the hopefulness there is that Monk is like, we're all in this together. I no longer want to antagonize you, and I no longer want to look down on you. It's more like, I see this for what it is, and best of luck to you. So it's not super saccharine. It's Monk learns to be friends with everybody. He's realizing this is, oh, it's not just super saccharine like Monk learns to be friends with everybody. He's realizing that this is a system and this is an institution, and that's been my problem that I haven't understood from the beginning. So I thought that was pretty poignant too. Right? So, all right, that's what I got.
That's what you got.
That's right. Any other thoughts? Anybody? Comments? Okay.
This was actually the biggest portrait of a number of people that I've heard since I've been here. That this was a very long dissertation on trying to understand what really went into the personality of these people. I thought you did it terrifically.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. All right, so next time will be June 27, and I will send out a thing, but I'm taking requests. We'll do a request again. That's what you guys send me. We'll see.
Yeah, it was.
One request per person.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ed.
you.
Bye, everybody. Bye, Annie.
Bye.
Take